Hi, you're watching Reddit Confessions. She wore the red sweater. That one sweater I hadn't seen in nearly 4 decades. It was buried in the back of the hallway closet, sealed in a vacuum bag with our old tax documents and my mother's ceramic angel. I didn't even realize it still existed. But there she was, Lorene, my wife of 37 years, standing in the kitchen with trembling hands, wearing that same red wool sweater from the fall of '86, the one she swore she lost in Seattle. And that's when my spine went cold. Not from the sweater, not from the memories, but from the way she looked at me, like she had something rehearsed, like she'd been carrying a script inside her for years and finally chose today to read it. She placed a chipped mug of tea in front of me. No words, no smile, just the sound of the ticking wall clock and the distant hum of the dryer upstairs. Then she sat down. No eye contact, just folded her hands, stared at the floor, and said, "Curtis, there's something you need to know, and I don't want you to forgive me." At first, I thought she was joking. Lorene jokes in weird ways. She once pretended to forget our anniversary just to see how I'd react. But this wasn't that. She pulled a faded photograph out of her back pocket. Not an envelope, not a letter. A photograph, torn at the corner, slightly wrinkled. It was her, in that same red sweater, her arms around a man I didn't recognize. But what made my knees go weak was the fact that the background wasn't unfamiliar. I knew that place. It was the old fishing cabin we sold 29 years ago, the one she never wanted to return to. She always said it gave her bad energy. Now I understood why. She didn't wait for me to ask. His name is Harlan, and that photo was taken 2 weeks before our wedding. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. It was like my vocal cords gave up on me. I was still staring at the photo like it would change if I blinked hard enough. Then came the final blow. He didn't just take that photo. He took something else, too. Something I never told you about. My hands were already shaking when she said it. But what came next? It shattered everything. Her words sat in the air like poison. He didn't just take that photo. He took something else, too. My stomach turned in ways I haven't felt since my father's funeral. I wanted to ask what she meant, but part of me already knew. That aching part of your gut that tells you to run, even while your brain begs you to stay. Lorene stood up and walked toward the living room window. I couldn't see her face, only the reflection of the red sweater in the glass. Her voice dropped. "Curtis, before we got married, I wasn't honest with you. I wasn't just seeing you." I felt my heart cave in on itself. 37 years. All the birthdays, the Christmas cards, the bad sitcoms we watched in silence when the kids moved out. Every moment suddenly felt like it was on someone else's timeline. I managed to whisper, "Was it just him?" She turned her head slightly, but not enough to look at me. No, that single word was worse than any punch. It was sharp, merciless, hollow. Lorene had always been the quiet type, composed, careful. She didn't even raise her voice when our car was stolen from the church parking lot back in '04. But now she sounded like someone who had finally removed a 37-year mask. "You used to go to your mother's place on weekends," she continued. "Do you remember that?" I nodded. Of course I remembered. My mom was sick. I took care of her while Lorene stayed home to rest or catch up on reading. I used to feel guilty leaving her alone. She stepped away from the window and walked back to the table. Then she said it. The thing that truly cracked the world beneath me. "He used to come over while you were gone. Every Saturday night. Same wine. Same music. Same sweater. I even washed it afterward, just in case." I blinked. Hard. Tried to replay the last 3 decades of our marriage like a movie, searching for clues, for signals I missed. I always thought Lorene was a little distant, a little too calm. But I blamed myself. I thought it was just who she was. I never imagined she had been living a double life during our first year of marriage. Was it love? I asked, voice dry. "No," she said too quickly. "It wasn't love. It was fear. I thought he'd come back into my life again, or that I'd ruin your happiness if I told you the truth." I actually laughed at that. A bitter, weak laugh that sounded more like a cough. "So instead, you built a lie big enough to last until now." She didn't answer, just looked at me like I was already fading from her memory. That night, I slept in the garage, not out of anger, but because every time I shut my eyes, I saw that red sweater. The fabric that hugged her in that photo. The same sweater I once complimented, thinking it brought out her eyes. Now I realized it was never for me. It was for him. I didn't know who I was married to anymore. and I had no idea what else was waiting to be unearthed. The next morning, I didn't go inside. I just sat in the car, engine off, staring at the garage door like it might open on its own and pull me back into the past. I couldn't bring myself to face her again. Not after what she confessed. Not after watching the woman I loved reduce our life into a quiet pile of "it was just fear." I was still in the same clothes from yesterday. Still hadn't eaten. My head throbbed, and my mouth was dry, but I didn't care. The only thing keeping me grounded was the thought that maybe, just maybe, there was more to this. I didn't know if I could handle more, but I needed to see the full picture, even if it shattered me for good. Around noon, when she left to go walk off the weight of the truth, as she put it. God, she actually said that. I went back inside. The house felt like a museum exhibit titled Marriage. Exhibit A, Lies and Linen. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt real anymore. I wandered aimlessly, my feet moving without permission, until I found myself in the guest room. I never go in there. It was always her space, the room she claimed for yoga, quiet reading, journaling. But something drew me there. Maybe the fact that it was the only place untouched by us. I opened the closet. Nothing seemed unusual until I noticed one of the floorboards was slightly raised at the corner, warped like it had been pried loose and pressed back down too many times. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I knelt, slipped my fingers beneath it, and lifted it with a sharp creak that echoed louder than it should have. Beneath the board, there was a small wooden box, the kind people keep old love letters in, or ashes. Inside was one folded envelope, my name written in her handwriting, the same cursive I saw on birthday cards and notes tucked into my work lunches. But this wasn't sweet. It was dated October 1993. I wasn't supposed to find it. The letter began with, "If you ever find this, it means I didn't have the courage to tell you in person." And then came the next sentence. "Mia isn't biologically yours." My breath caught in my throat. My hands started to shake so violently I nearly dropped the letter. Mia, our daughter, the one I rocked to sleep, the one I taught to drive, the one who calls me every Sunday like clockwork, the one who once said, "You're my rock, Dad." Now I didn't know who I was to her. And worse, I didn't know who was her father. I didn't know how long I sat on the guest room floor. The letter in my lap, my hands cold, my mind blank. You always hear about people blacking out during trauma, losing time, forgetting things. But I remembered every single second. I remember the exact angle of the sunlight through the blinds. I remember the way the floor creaked beneath me when I shifted. I even remember the distant bark of the neighbor's dog, like the world just kept spinning while mine had collapsed. Mia isn't biologically mine. That sentence echoed like a chant in my head, over and over. Each time it landed heavier. I thought of all the nights I stayed up when she was sick, the time I drove 4 hours to fix her flat tire during college, the dance we shared at her wedding. Was all of that now pretend? Did she know? God, did Laureen ever plan on telling her? I couldn't breathe. My legs went numb. I had to crawl to the hallway before I could even stand up. And yet, in the most twisted way, I wasn't even angry yet. I was hollow, empty, like grief had taken up all the space where rage should have gone. I placed the letter back in the box. I didn't want Laureen to know I'd read it. Not yet. I needed to know more. And deep down, I knew she wouldn't tell me unless I made her. That night, I didn't speak. She didn't ask why. She acted like everything was fine, made lentil soup, watched a baking show. I watched her. Every blink, every twitch. I looked for guilt, for cracks in her performance. And finally, after hours of silence, I asked quietly, "Is Harlan Mia's father?" She didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. "No," she said, her voice low. "Not him." I stared at her. My throat tightened. "Then who?" She swallowed hard, looked away, and whispered a name I hadn't heard since my cousin's funeral in 1992. Devin. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. Devin was my cousin, my best friend growing up. He used to sneak us beers at family reunions. He died in a hunting accident when I was 32. "You're lying," I said, but even I didn't believe the words. She shook her head. "It was only once. I didn't even know I was pregnant until months later. You were so excited, Curtis. I didn't have the heart." Didn't have the heart? I stood up and left the room. I didn't even put on shoes. I just walked. Through the neighborhood. Past the same houses we'd trick-or-treated with Mia. past the mailbox where she once surprised me with a Father's Day card drawn in crayon. Now I didn't know what I was anymore. Father? Fool? Or just a man who loved to lie too long? I walked for nearly 2 hours that night. No coat, no phone, no direction. Just the rhythmic sound of my feet against the sidewalk and the occasional flicker of a street lamp humming above. I must have passed a dozen houses where the glow of television screens lit up family living rooms. Happy couples, laugh tracks, people wrapped in blankets, sipping cocoa. I wondered if any of them had secrets buried under their floorboards, or if I was the only one who'd lived this long beside a stranger. When I finally returned home, I didn't go to the bedroom. I couldn't, not with her lying there like she hadn't just cracked open my entire existence. I slept on the couch, fully clothed, staring at the ceiling like it might fall on me too. I didn't even realize I'd been crying until I woke up to my own dried tears on the throw pillow. The next morning, she was already in the kitchen, making coffee like it was just another Tuesday. She poured me a cup without asking, as if we hadn't whispered the name of my dead cousin into the air like it was nothing. She placed the mug on the table and turned to leave, but I spoke before I could stop myself. Did he know? She stopped in the doorway. Her back stiffened, her hand tightening around the edge of the wall. What, Devin? I said louder. Did he know you were pregnant? That you might be carrying his child? Her silence was my answer. And then she said something I didn't expect. He begged me not to tell you. He said it would destroy everything between you two. I think he hated himself for it. That gutted me. Not because she confirmed it, but because now I had to relive every memory I ever had with him through a shattered lens. Every inside joke, every birthday gift, every fishing trip, all fake, all tainted. She sat across from me slowly, as if I was a wild animal she didn't want to startle. Curtis, I've tried to let it go. I've tried to pretend it never happened. But I've seen it in your face all these years that you always felt something was off. And you were right. I wanted to scream. Instead, I laughed again. That same bitter, pathetic laugh that only comes from a place of pure exhaustion. I raised a daughter who isn't mine. I buried a cousin who betrayed me. And I've slept next to a woman who knew all of it, every single day, for nearly 4 decades. She looked at me, her eyes welling up. I never meant to say his name out loud. I didn't want to hurt you. Too late. The damage wasn't new. It had just finally been named. That afternoon, I drove to the cemetery without really deciding to. My hands just took the wheel and turned, like muscle memory was dragging me towards something unresolved. Devin's grave was in the older section, near the sycamore tree that always loses its leaves too early. I hadn't visited in over a decade. Not since Mia's high school graduation. Back then, I brought flowers. This time, I brought nothing. I stood there for a long time, staring at the simple gray stone. No fancy inscription. Just his name, 2 dates, and a phrase that now felt like mockery. Beloved son and friend. I thought about how many times I called him my brother, how I envied the way people gravitated toward him, how I used to joke that he could charm the moon out of the sky if he smiled hard enough. Now all I saw was silence, and dirt, and the brutal irony of it all, and then a voice behind me. Soft. Familiar. I didn't think you'd come here. I turned, already knowing it was Lorene. She held a bouquet of sunflowers, his favorite. She used to bring them every year on the anniversary. She must have known I'd go there once I learned the truth. I don't want to hear excuses, I said, my voice barely a whisper. She nodded. I didn't come to give any. I just thought, maybe we should stand here together, at least once. With everything out in the open. I stared at her. That same woman I once watched walk down the aisle, trembling with joy. Now she was trembling again, but for a different reason entirely. You said he begged you not to tell me, I muttered. But did he ever ask you to stop? Her lips parted slightly, then closed. That pause said more than anything else. No, she admitted. Not once. So they didn't just slip up. It wasn't a moment. It was a choice. A series of choices. They had a routine. They shared wine and music and God knows what else, while I was wiping my mother's brow and taking calls about her medications. You visited him more after he died than you ever visited me when I was in the hospital, I said, the words tumbling out without a filter. 3 years ago, Lorene. I had surgery. I begged you not to leave that night. Her face fell. I couldn't sleep there. Hospitals make me. No, don't do that, I snapped. Don't make this about fluorescent lights and antiseptic. You just didn't want to see me at my weakest. She didn't deny it. Instead, she placed the sunflowers on Devon's grave and whispered, "He would have been a good father, but he never got the chance." That was the moment something inside me cracked for good. Not because of Devon, not because of Lorene, but because I realized Mia, my daughter, might one day stand at this same grave and never know why she felt drawn to it. Because no one had ever told her the truth. I didn't speak to Lorene for 2 days after the cemetery. We passed each other like ghosts in our own home, silently orbiting around 37 years of decay. I kept thinking, what would have happened if I never found that floorboard? If she never wore the red sweater? If the past had just stayed buried where it belonged? But the thing about secrets is, they always leave a scent. And once you catch it, you can't stop chasing. On the third night, I finally stepped into Mia's childhood bedroom. I hadn't been in there since she left for college. It still smelled faintly like lavender and pencil shavings. Posters on the walls, a trophy shelf collecting dust, her high school graduation cap still sitting crooked on a bookshelf. It should have felt nostalgic. It felt surgical. I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe nothing. Maybe some sign that she knew. Maybe something to convince me she didn't. I opened the bottom drawer of her old desk and found a locked metal box. The kind Lorene always gave her for private things. We respected her space back then. Trusted her. Trusted everything. I almost left it there. Almost. But the key was taped underneath the desk, sloppy hiding, in hindsight. My hands shook as I turned the lock. Inside were letters. Handwritten. Dozens. All addressed to M. But they weren't from me. Or Lorene. They were from Devon. Some were dated before Mia was even born. Others after. One letter was dated just 4 months before his death. In it, he wrote, "I wish I could tell you who I really am. I wish I could be the one to walk you to school or cheer at your recitals. But life doesn't work that way, does it?" I dropped the letter. My ears rang. My vision blurred. She knew. Mia knew. Not everything, maybe, but enough to keep these letters hidden. Enough to suspect. And she never said a word. Not one whisper. Not even a flinch when I called her my little girl. Suddenly, everything felt like a performance. Birthday candles, bedtime stories, college visits, all of it. Was she protecting her mother? Protecting me? Or was she waiting for me to find out on my own? I sat on her bed for a long time, surrounded by memories that no longer felt like mine. And for the first time since this entire unraveling began, I wasn't sad. I was angry. Because now it wasn't just a betrayal between lovers. It was a betrayal from the one person I thought would never keep something from me. And I didn't know who I was mad at more, her or myself. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. The letters from Devon were still laid out on Mia's bed, staring back at me like pieces of a puzzle I was never meant to finish. Every sentence hit like a betrayal. Not just from Lorene, but from Mia, too. I'd always told myself there were 2 people in this world who'd never lie to me, my wife and my daughter. Now I wasn't sure I even had either. The next morning, I called Mia. I didn't plan what I was going to say. I just knew I couldn't go another day pretending we were the same father and daughter who used to make pancakes every Sunday. When she picked up, her voice was soft, unsure. "Hey, Dad, everything okay?" I asked her to come over. No context. No warning. Just, "Please. Today." She was at the house by afternoon. When she stepped inside, I was already sitting in her room, the metal box beside me. She didn't pretend not to notice it. She sat down slowly, folded her hands in her lap, and said, "I've been waiting for this day since I was 15. I didn't speak. I didn't even nod. She looked at me with the same eyes I watched blink open for the first time in that hospital room decades ago. "I found the letters by accident," she said. "I didn't know who he was at first. Mom said he was a family friend, but I could tell she was lying. The way she reacted when I asked questions, it didn't feel right." Her voice cracked. I kept reading. "Not because I wanted to hurt you, but because I needed to understand why I always felt like something was missing." I asked her why she never came to me. "Because you were my dad," she said, eyes wet. "You are. And I didn't want that to change. Not even if it meant keeping this from you." And somehow, that broke me more than anything else. Because in all the confusion, all the betrayal, she still saw me as her father. I hugged her. For a long time. No words. Just the kind of hug that tries to press broken things back together. Later, we sat in the kitchen. Lorene joined us. No yelling. No accusations. Just truth. Quiet and unvarnished. "I'm not sure what happens next. Therapy, maybe. Time apart. We're time together, but finally honest. But for the first time in weeks, I don't feel lost. I feel seen. And maybe that's enough to begin again. Thanks for watching Reddit Confessions. If you've ever discovered a secret that shook your life, what did you do? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more unbelievable, real-life stories that leave you thinking long after they end. We'll see you next time.